Hello, I'm Julie. I live alone in Folkestone with my cat Kevin. Lockdown for me was actually quite a positive experience. People look at me or listen to me as if I'm mad. I didn't find it distressing in the least. I'm quite fortunate that my employer managed to get us all back working within a week. Beautiful weather, as I recall. So I was a bit gutted, really, that they managed to get their act together so quickly. So really, my daily pattern didn't change much at all. I was working. Having said that, having spare time that I spent at home meant that my garden looked amazing. I noticed that because it was very quiet, the bird song of all things, I'm not one of these feely, touchy people, but the bird song was so loud and I hadn't really noticed it before. Lockdown was quite strange. I'm quite a sociable person. I have or had quite an active social life, and obviously not being able to go out meant that that was curtailed somewhat. And I found, even though it was a couple of years ago, I haven't really got back into a social life of any sorts at all. I do see my friends from time to time, but nowhere near as much. The mental health thing, I really don't understand it. I think that from my personal experience, I know people suffered, so don't think me blasé, but I think a lot of it was talked up by the media. I heard a radio program and all the time it was, how does this affect your mental health? Are you depressed? Talk to someone. There's helplines. There's this, there's that. And I found that made me quite anxious. So I just didn't read anything or listen to anything that focused on how bad I must be feeling because I live on my own and I don't see anyone. A positive thing for lockdown for me was the street that I live in. Our street's always been very sociable. We had annual street parties and garage sales and know the neighbours. I wouldn't say I was on intimate, friendly terms with my neighbours. Yeah, one either side, but the other end of the street, not so much so. I know their faces, but never really talked to them. But lockdown, when we had the old Thursday night clapping for carers and nurses, that was quite spectacular, really, because everybody was out on the street, banging saucepans, clapping, whatever. And a couple of times, we've got musicians living in our roads. They perform quite frequently in Folkestone and around and about. And a couple of times, they'd be in the middle of the road having impromptu performances. So people would drag the table and chairs out to the front garden and a glass of wine and listen to the music and dance about. A bit like a noisy personal disco, really, because you couldn't talk to anybody else, just your immediate neighbours. Side to side, so that was quite interesting. I lost a relative through COVID. The funeral was quite sad because there was nobody there. I watched it on computer. The only person that attended his funeral was the undertaker, and that really was quite poignant and sad. Day-to-day lockdown, as I said, I'm quite self-sufficient. So I was working, don't forget, 9 to 5 or 10 till 6 or whatever my shift happened to be. So that was normality for me. And then in the evenings, it was actually quite a pleasure to watch rubbish on telly or do the garden or stare at the pond. I'm lucky that I live very close to the beach, so I'd go for a paddle on the sunny sands.